to the Football for Kids podcast with me, Darren Rees. This is a Patreon-only and Apple Podcast subscriber episode. And it's on a player who has been requested, quite honestly, thousands of times. And that is the Southampton, Blackburn, Newcastle and England legend Alan Shearer, who, may I add, is still, after all of these years, the number one top scorer in the Premier League. This is a two-part episode. This is episode 1. Alan Shearer was born on August 13th in 1970. He was born in Newcastle, a place which is, and always has been, very special to him. Alan's dad was encouraging with young Alan Shearer when he was starting out to play football. As a youngster, he mainly played on the streets of his friends, which is almost always the place where footballers start out. That and playing down the park with a family member. When Alan was younger and playing football, he played in midfield. It was a position on the pitch which he liked, because, in his own words, it meant he could get involved in the games, and involved being a key word there. Because Alan Shearer was one of those players who was known for his extreme strength. Shearer stood out when he was playing football at school. He was athletic, determined, and it said that he had an incredible attitude for winning the ball and doing something with it. That alone is a lot when it comes to making a successful footballer, because an attitude will get you a long way. Alan captained the school team, and when he was doing so, he and his teammates won a tournament at the famous St James's Park, which, in case you didn't know, is Newcastle United Stadium. And it's a place which would eventually become home for young Shearer, but we'll get to that in a bit. Alan was one of those kids who many knew it wouldn't be long before he would be spotted by a top scout. And then that day came when a football scout called Jack Hickson noticed him. Jack was a well-known man across the footballing landscape and was responsible for finding some of the best talent in the world. He spotted Alan Shearer, and because of that, he ended up on a casual basis spending a lot of time at Southampton's youth academy. In the meantime, Alan had trials with West Brom, Manchester City and Newcastle. All trials were successful, but something felt right for him at Southampton, and that is where he would go next. In 1986, which was even before I was born, Alan Shearer became an official Saints player. He spent a couple of years with the youth squad before being promoted to the first team, where he could be quite simply sensational. It wasn't long before young Alan Shearer would be on the back pages of the newspapers, and in one of his first games at the club, at Southampton's home ground, he scored a hat-trick against Arsenal, in a game which ended 4-2. Alan was just 17 years old when he did this. 17 years old, breaking 30-year records. The person who held the record before, as the youngest player to ever score a hat-trick in the English top division, before Alan, was the great Jimmy Greaves. I did an episode on him a couple of months ago. It's on the main podcast. You can go and check it out. Anyway, back to Shearer, who was 17 years old and lighting up football pitches in the English top division. It was when Alan was at Southampton that he got called up to represent his country of England in the England under-21 squad. Alan and his teammates headed off to a tournament in France. Shearer scored 7 goals in 4 games, and he had the French footballers and fans looking at each other like, whoa, who's this kid? Because of how good, how strong, and the attitude that Shearer had, he was getting noticed by all the top teams around the country. And it's reported, at this time, Manchester United took a very keen interest in signing him. And they most certainly...